Hospitals had rules, ethics, even salaries for doctors. They separated contagious patients, had water sanitation systems, and used antiseptic herbs. This was 900 years before germ theory in the West. It's like they were living in the future, but nobody told the history books. Data, and again, it wasn't about ego or competition. These people didn't chase fame. Their books didn't have bestseller stickers. They were driven by this insane curiosity, like, if God created this universe with laws and patterns, then understanding those laws brings you closer to the creator. That mindset made science sacred. It made discovery an act of devotion. Meanwhile, in Europe, people were getting burned alive for suggesting that the earth moved around the sun. That's the gap we're talking about. You've got one civilization exploring celestial mechanics and another one terrified of its own shadow. And you know what's even crazier? The influence didn't just... You ever think about how insane that mindset was for the time? Man, like, these scholars were living in an age where most of the world explained everything through myth and superstition, but they were out there saying, no, let's measure it. Let's test it. Let's write it down. That's pure science. The birth of the scientific method before anyone even called it that. People talk about Francis Bacon or Galileo inventing that idea, but the truth is, centuries earlier, Muslim thinkers were already doing controlled experiments, documenting their methods, and checking results through repetition.
Yeah.
And one of the wildest examples is in medicine. You've got this guy, Ibn Sina, Avicenna, who wrote the Canon of Medicine. That book was like the medical Bible of the world for 600 years. Universities in Europe used it up until the 17th century. Think about that, a Persian scholar's textbook guiding European doctors hundreds of years after he died. That's legendary. He described contagious diseases, the connection between emotions and health, and even surgical techniques that were way ahead of his time. And Al-Razi, too. He was treating smallpox and measles with actual science, while Europe was bleeding people with leeches. And they weren't doing it in some elite secret lab either. They built hospitals that were free, organized, and specialized. You had wards for specific illnesses, pharmacies, record-keeping systems, all that 1,000 years ago. It's like they predicted the entire concept of modern medicine. You could walk into a hospital in Baghdad in the 10th century, and it'd be cleaner and more advanced than most European facilities of the 15th. But what's really fascinating, man, is how all this was driven by a shared curiosity, not just for personal gain or fame. They genuinely believed that the universe was designed to be understood. Like, if God made the world, then studying it is part of knowing Him. That's such a cool way to see it. It wasn't just about progress, it was about purpose. You don't get burnout when your research feels like prayer. And astronomy, man, that was their jam. They built these massive observatories with domes, angles, and precision instruments carved out of brass and steel. They charted thousands of stars by hand. They calculated planetary orbits, predicted eclipses, and refined the calendar systems. And all this without telescopes or modern equipment, just straight up genius, patience, and math. And their math game. Off the charts. Algebra, trigonometry, logarithms, all heavily developed or invented during that period. You look at words like algebra and algorithm, and they literally come from Arabic roots. So when you pull out your phone, type into Google, or run code, you're literally using linguistic and conceptual tools that trace back to those scholars. The irony is poetic. Modern tech runs on ancient Islamic innovation. And what's crazy is how open they were to collaboration. They had Christians, Jews, Persians, Indians, and Arabs all working together under this umbrella of shared curiosity. It wasn't about what religion you were, it was about what you could contribute. Imagine that an empire where the currency wasn't just gold, it was knowledge. That's how you build a civilization that lasts centuries. Man, when you look at that culture of curiosity, it wasn't just a few smart people doing their thing. It was an entire civilization built around the idea that learning mattered. Imagine living in a city where every corner has someone teaching, debating, writing, experimenting. The call to prayer echoes, and right after that, the call to study. That's the kind of energy they had. You'd walk through Baghdad or Damascus and see scholars huddled over scrolls, students copying notes by hand, doctors discussing anatomy in courtyards, poets dropping philosophical bombs next to mathematicians. It was electric, dude. Like an ancient Silicon Valley mixed with Harvard and a spiritual retreat all in one place. And that's the thing. They didn't hoard knowledge. They documented everything, shared it, translated it, sent it across continents. Imagine copying thousands of pages by candlelight just to make sure someone in another city could learn from it. That's dedication. That's passion. They believed knowledge belonged to everyone, which is crazy because even today we've got paywalls and patents and all this gatekeeping around information. They were doing open source learning before the internet existed. Tata, you got to appreciate how that mindset reshaped the world. Like, think about Spain under Muslim rule, Al-Andalus, Córdoba, Granada, Seville. Those cities were melting pots of culture and intellect. You had Jewish philosophers like Maimonides studying Arabic texts, Christian monks learning medicine from Muslim doctors. It was collaboration on a level humanity hadn't seen before. And that exchange is what cracked open Europe's mind later. The Renaissance didn't just fall from the sky. It was imported, translated, and inspired by that earlier Islamic boom. But even beyond the science, man, the attitude they had toward existence was profound. They believed that everything. The stars, the human body, mathematics, sound, all of it was connected. You couldn't study one without appreciating the others. So when they wrote about astronomy, it wasn't just about planets. It was about how celestial order reflected divine order. That's some next level perspective. It's like looking at quantum physics and seeing spirituality in the equations. And let's not forget the innovations that changed the game. Paper, for instance. Muslims brought papermaking from China and turned it into a whole industry. That's what allowed books, libraries, and education to explode across the empire. Before that, writing was expensive. After that, ideas became portable. That's how revolutions start, not with weapons, but with paper and ink. And dude, the architecture. It's mathematical poetry. You walk into the Alhambra in Spain or the mosque is in Samarkand and Cairo, and you feel this deep harmony. Every arch, every tile pattern, every ratio, it's geometry turned into emotion. They understood that symmetry wasn't just beauty, it was logic you could feel. They lived in a world where math literally surrounded them, carved into walls and woven into carpets. And all of this came from a culture that believed truth was universal, that it didn't belong to one tribe or one book or one language. Truth was out there, waiting to be explored. That's such a beautiful concept, man, because that's what real science is, the pursuit of truth, wherever it leads, whoever finds it first. And here's something that always gets me, man, the humility. These scholars were brilliant, but they didn't act like they had all the answers. They treated knowledge as a journey, not a possession. You'd read their writings, and they'd start with, "Only God knows best," like a little reminder that even the smartest human still only sees a fraction of the full picture. That's so different from the ego-driven science we see sometimes today. Back then, it wasn't about proving someone wrong. It was about uncovering truth together. And that's probably why their discoveries lasted. They weren't chasing fame, they were chasing understanding, like Jabir ibn Hayyan, the father of chemistry. This guy was distilling acids, inventing lab techniques, classifying elements, all in the 8th century. Before Europe even had alchemy figured out, he was doing actual experimental chemistry. He developed methods we still use today: crystallization, evaporation, filtration, the building blocks of every lab. But he wrote it all down with this weird sense of awe, like, look what we found in the design of creation. That humility is what makes it all timeless. Jojo, and music. 2. People forget how scientific that was. Scholars like Al-Khwarizmi studied sound waves, instruments, and harmonics. They analyzed the physics of tone before Europe even had formal music theory. They literally understood vibration as both science and art. Something you feel and something you measure. They turned sound into math and emotion at the same time. What's also wild is how socially progressive some of these societies were, considering the time period. Education wasn't just for the elite. Women were scholars, poets, doctors, and mathematicians. There are records of women teaching in mosques, running clinics, writing commentaries on scientific texts, like Fatima al-Fihri. She founded the world's first university in Morocco, a woman, in the 9th century. That's not just impressive, that's revolutionary, and it tells you how central learning was to the entire culture. Are in the libraries, man. Imagine walking into one of those libraries, shelves upon shelves of handwritten books. Baghdad's House of Wisdom, Córdoba's libraries, Cairo's institutions, these were massive data centers of the ancient world. They had catalogs, indexing systems, even lending policies. You could borrow a manuscript, study it, and contribute your own notes before returning it. It's the original Wikipedia, just way more sacred and beautiful. Ta-ta, but what really trips me out is how that intellectual curiosity created this ripple that went global. The knowledge they built didn't just stay in the Muslim world. It moved outward, translated into Latin, absorbed by Europe, and evolved. It seeded the Renaissance, shaped modern science, and influenced the very logic our world runs on today. It's like this hidden thread connecting medieval Baghdad to Silicon Valley. Every time someone runs code, calculates an equation, or looks through a microscope, they're unknowingly continuing that legacy. Data, and yet nobody talks about it. We act like history just jumped from the Greek straight to the Renaissance, like there was this 1,000-year nap in between. Nah, man, that nap was actually the most creative period in human history. Tada, and dude, when you think about how that knowledge faded from the mainstream story, it's almost tragic. Like somewhere along the line, humanity just forgot to give credit where it was due. The printing press shows up in Europe, and suddenly all these ideas that had been circulating for centuries get reborn under new names. People start publishing, universities explode, and the Enlightenment happens, and everyone's like, wow, look at this explosion of human genius! Meanwhile, the foundation had already been laid ages before in Arabic, Persian, and Urdu texts that most of those guys couldn't even read. Today, it's kind of poetic and sad at the same time. Because when the Mongols sacked Baghdad in the 13th century, they destroyed the House of Wisdom, one of the greatest libraries in history. They threw thousands of manuscripts into the Tigris River, and people say the river ran black from the ink. Imagine that, man, centuries of human knowledge wiped out in a few days. And yet, fragments survived. Books made their way west. Scholars carried copies, and that knowledge somehow kept breathing. It's like truth has this survival instinct. You can't kill it. You can burn the paper, but the ideas keep sneaking through borders and generations until they find new life. And what's wild is that even in decline, that intellectual spirit didn't completely vanish. You still had mathematicians, astronomers, and philosophers carrying on the work. It's like a slow burning ember that kept glowing under the ashes until the world was ready to reignite it. The Renaissance, the scientific revolution, all of that, it's like a remix built off those earlier beats. And here's something people don't get. Those Muslim scholars weren't doing all this just for utility. It wasn't like, let's make inventions to get rich. Nah, it was about understanding the nature of reality. You read their writings and you see that everything they studied, from planetary motion to human anatomy, had a philosophical backbone. They weren't splitting science and spirituality into separate boxes. To them, the search for truth was one big, unified quest. That's something we've kind of lost today, man. Set up because now we've got science as this cold, mechanical pursuit. It's all data, equations, progress, but very little awe. Back then, they had both. They saw mystery and math as two sides of the same coin. Like, we study the universe not to control it, but to understand our place in it. That's deep. It's like they were doing physics with a sense of reverence.